You can usually tell pretty quickly whether a leader actually owns the seat they're in, or whether they just learned how to survive inside. Not from the numbers, not from the title, not from how long they've been in the role. You'll hear it in how they describe the business, what they see, what they miss, where they go deep and where they stay surface, and even what risks they name and which ones never come up, because that will tell you almost everything. And if you're watching this, here's the real question. When you walk through your business honestly, where are you deep? Where are you light? And where are you weak? Because that trio will tell us the real story. I spent over 2 decades as a top-performing wealth advisor, leader, and executive, building and running multi-billion-dollar businesses. So what are you going to learn from today? 1, the difference between owning your seat and surviving inside it. 2, why staying quiet about known gaps gets expensive later. 3, how culture, turnover, productivity, and leadership changes above you will expose what always was there. So I first want you to think about how you describe your business. Not in a performance review, not in a pipeline call. When someone asks you to walk them through what you're actually sitting in, the risk on your radar, the depth of your team, what you see coming, what keeps you up, how do you talk about it? Because that's the honest signal, not the version of the business you know how to manage upward, not the version that keeps things smooth above you, the real one. And when you walk through it honestly, what you understand actually shows up, and what you don't shows up as clearly. And that's why the difference between knowing something deeply, light, or weak matters. Because when you know something deep, it means you understand the part of the business well enough to hold the standard even if the conditions change. When you're light in something, it means you understand it well enough to manage it while things stay stable, but not well enough to lead to real pressure if the support around it shifts. And weak means foundational to the seat. You know it's there, and the business has been built around it instead of through it. And that trio is the real picture. So let's start with your foundational gaps. Not everything, the must-haves. The non-negotiables are the seat you're in regardless of the firm, the market, or the environment. Because what shows up most often at this level isn't a lack of talent. It's that the role requires more operating range than you actually own. And instead of closing that gap directly, the business gets built around it. The numbers, they still report. The relationships above you stay intact, and the activity stays visible. And from the outside, it looks like you have the seat handled. But once you pressure test how you actually think through the business, not what you produce, how you think, the difference between managing the seat and owning it becomes visible. Because owning the seat means you understand the full operating reality underneath the results. You'll see the risks before they surface. You know what the business actually depends on and what happens if those dependencies shift. And you're not just tracking outcomes, you're actually shaping them. But when you survive inside the seat, it means the results are real, but the foundation underneath it is thinner than it looks. You'll know what the business rewards, and you'll become very good at delivering it. But there are layers of the operating reality that you haven't fully gone into because the business hasn't forced you to yet. And here's the part that almost never gets said out loud. You already know where you're thin, and you've known for a while, and it's not a blind spot. It's a known gap you've been carrying quietly because the alternative felt more dangerous than the gap itself. Because think about what happens the moment you surface it. Not to appear, not to someone safe. To the person above you has a say in whether you stay in that seat or not. And the moment you show a real gap, not a team issue, not a market problem, but a genuine weakness in your operating range, the questions start. Is she actually ready for this? Does he really have what this seat requires? Should we be thinking about this person differently? And you watch those conversations happen to others in the business. You know exactly where it leads and how fast it moves on once it starts. So you stay quiet. You kept the output moving. You kept the relationship intact. You managed the version of the business that kept things smooth above you. And you told yourself that you'll address it when you had more room. And I've seen this myself consistently across markets, across firms, and over a long time. The leaders who stayed quiet to protect their seat paid their price anyway. And it wasn't always immediately. It was sometimes maybe years later. But the gap they carried quietly never closed on its own. And when those conditions finally changed, or when the protection that had been covering it shifted, everything they were managing around became visible at once. And staying quiet, it didn't save the seat. It just delayed their exposure. And that delay is what made it more expensive when it arrived. Because the gap between you managing the seat and owning it doesn't stay invisible forever. And at some point, the protection runs out. Whether a new leader comes in above you with fresh eyes and no obligation to read your track record the way the current person does, or whether the business shifts in a new direction that exposes what was thin underneath, or a key person leaves and suddenly what the model was depending on is gone. And when that happens, there are only a few ways that I've seen usually play out. You'll have some leaders leave. They'll take the track record to repackage the story and move somewhere else new where the protection resets. And all it does, it buys them time until the same pattern of services in the new environment. But some others will get moved inside the same firm. Different role, smaller scope, less visibility. Still employed, but no longer in the seat they built their identity around. And then you'll have some that will just survive longer than that. The numbers hold, the relationships stay intact, and there's never one single moment of exposure. But eventually, it always still shows up. It shows up in the culture first. The team starts reflecting the ceiling above them. Standards start to drift quietly, and the environment starts feeling like one that maintains rather than builds. And then you'll have your turnover. The strongest people, they'll leave first because strong people feel the ceiling before anyone else names it. And they just don't make noise, they'll just go. Then you'll have your productivity gaps. The activity is still happening, the effort looks real, but the business is producing below what the market should be capable of, and nobody can fully explain why. And then the management change comes. Fresh eyes, no history, no obligations to protect what was protected before. And everything that was managed around the years becomes visible to someone who doesn't already know to look past it. And that's where the gap becomes the most expensive thing in the room. So here's what I want you to examine honestly. Not the version you give in a performance review, the real one. Where are you generally deep in this business? Not where you're confident. Where do you understand the operating reality well enough that if conditions change tomorrow, you can still hold the standard the seat requires without the things currently holding it in place? And where are you light? The areas you understand well enough to manage, but not well enough to lead through real pressure. And where do you need the business to stay stable, certain people to stay in place, or certain relationships to stay intact in order for the results to keep looking the way they do? And then where are you weak? The foundational areas of the seat you built around rather than through. The ones that you're aware of but haven't addressed. Not because you can't, but because nothing has forced it yet. Because that's the honest picture. And then ask yourself one more question. If your manager changed tomorrow, if someone arrived above you with fresh eyes and no history with you, what would they see when they looked underneath the results? Because that answer is the real distance between managing the seat and truly owning it. Because the seat can protect you for a while. It can buy you time. It can cover what hasn't been fully built. And it can even keep the story intact longer than it should. But it can never own the role for you. And when those conditions change, that difference gets expensive fast. At EliteVate, this is the line we watch most closely. Because in a world full of information, people choose authority that protects them from being wrong at the most expensive moments. Every week, I break down the real strategies behind top performance for wealth advisors and leaders ready to operate at the level they're built for. This is EliteVate. We cut through the fluff, no hype, no theory, just strategy, psychology, and execution. If this hits home, subscribe. You're not just watching and learning, you will become the model others follow.